In the previous video, I had shown you that you can use the databricks.com URL to go to the Databricks platform. And here you can click on login. And after that, you can use your Google ID or you can continue with Microsoft. Continue with Microsoft will only work if you have a Microsoft account, or else you can provide your email ID also. Now, if I continue with Google, it will ask me to select the Google ID. And once the authentication is done, it will take me to the Databricks console. You'll never know which cloud platform is being used to launch this console. And then you'll get only one workspace, and you see the workspace is in US East 2 region. So it can be either AWS, it can be Azure also. What I'm trying to say here is that you do not have any control if you use the databricks.com URL to log in or to prepare your data platform. But that is not something we want to do. We want to use any of the cloud providers. It can be Azure or AWS or GCP. But how do you do that? How do you use Databricks in conjunction with the cloud providers like AWS and Azure? And in this section, I'm going to discuss that, how we can use Databricks on any one of the cloud providers. I'll be using Azure and AWS. If you are familiar with GCP, you can use Google Cloud also. So let us try to understand how these cloud providers gives the Databricks components. Now to work on that, we need to understand the Databricks resource hierarchy. So what is this Databricks resource hierarchy? So first of all, we have something called a Databricks account. Now account is something which is at the top of the hierarchy. So whatever you do in Databricks, everything would be done inside of an account. Now this account or Databricks account is at the top of the hierarchy. So you can consider this as the root of Databricks, or this is the place where all your Databricks platform or all your Databricks components will reside. A single account can be organization level, it can be environment level also. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you are working for a company and that organization has Databricks. The organization can choose to use only one account for their entire Databricks work. Or it can be environment level also. For example, there can be one account for prod, another account for development, another account for testing, etc. So whichever ways, account is always at the top of the hierarchy. Now underneath account, we have the identities like user, service principal, group, etc. So user is nothing but a user who can work on the Databricks data platform. Service principals are identities which are associated with jobs, Lakeflow connects, etc. And then we can use groups. Groups are nothing but collections of users. And these are called identities inside of Databricks. Now all these identities are defined at the account level. So the user, the service principal, the group, all of these are defined at account level, which means that you can have multiple users, you can have multiple service principals, and you can have multiple groups under the same account. And then we have Unity Catalog, which is also defined at account level. I'll be talking about Unity Catalog in a separate video, but it is the meta store for all the Databricks components that you have. And Unity Catalog is very important to work in Databricks because using Unity Catalog, we define a lot of stuff. And also it is used for data governance in Databricks. So as I said, Unity Catalog is also defined or created at account level. Now underneath we have multiple workspaces, and workspaces are the places where we do all the work. So let's say we have to create a notebook, if you have to define a Spark job, if you have to define a Lakeflow Connect, etc. All these things are done inside of individual workspaces. Each workspace can correspond to a data mart, or each workspace can correspond to a data engineering pipeline. Now, if your account is at org level, if you have defined account at organization level, then typically each workspace would be for individual environments. But if you have defined accounts at environment level, then each workspace would typically be for different data engineering pipelines or different business units. Whichever ways, workspace is the place where we do all the work. And because of that, workspace contains compute and network. As we are talking about distributed processing, we need to have compute capability for the data processing requirements. So that's why we need compute. By compute, I mean virtual servers, which gives us RAM, which gives us CPU, etc. And when we define virtual servers, it can be Azure VMs or AWS EC2 instances, they have to be defined inside of a network. So the compute and the network would be defined at individual workspace level. Then we have different folders and repos. We'll talk about folders and GitHub repos later on, but these are also limited to a workspace. We can define notebooks, you can define jobs, you can define Delta Lake tables, etc. All of them would be inside of a single workspace. So each workspace would give you an isolated environment of compute, network, folders, repos, notebooks, jobs, Delta tables, lakehouse, etc. You can think of workspace as an isolated environment for your entire work. It can be a business unit level work, or it can be a data mart level work, or data engineering pipeline level work, etc. The identities and the Unity catalog that are defined at account level can be assigned or associated to one or more workspaces. We do not define users, service principals, or groups at individual workspace. We define these at account level, and then we associate the identities or the Unity catalog, or rather and the Unity catalog, to these workspaces. We can attach them or associate them with the workspaces. So this is the Databricks resource hierarchy. Now, if you do not consider cloud, if you do not consider anything else, let's say you are defining or you are hosting Databricks on your personal laptop, then you'll have to create an account, you'll have to create user, service principals, Unity catalog, and workspaces. So this is the hierarchy of Databricks resources. Now, as we'll be using cloud service providers, Azure and AWS, we need to know how these components are aligned with the cloud resources. First, let's talk about Azure. Now, let's say this is my Azure environment and I have an Azure account. The Databricks account would be sitting inside of the Azure tenant. The user service principal group, meaning that all the identities that I had talked about in the previous slide, which are Databricks resources, they are Databricks only resources, meaning that the identities, the Unity catalogs, etc., those are created inside of the Databricks account. Same is the case with Unity catalog, which is a Databricks only resource. Even though under the hood, Unity catalog uses blob storage or ADLS for storage purpose, but will not be able to see that using Azure portal because this is a Databricks only resource. But when you talk about the workspace components like the notebooks, folders, repos, etc., they use ADLS or essentially the blob storage of Azure. Then you have workspace compute and network, and these are launched in Azure. So the networking would be defined in Azure using VNet or virtual network. The compute would be defined using virtual machines or Azure virtual machines, and the storage, which would be Azure blob storage, but these would be defined in Azure and they would be mapped or assigned to the Databricks account. So this is how Databricks components use the Azure resources. I've not talked about the mapping yet. I'll be talking about the mapping shortly. But essentially, if you are using Azure Cloud, then everything that you create inside of Databricks will use Azure resources. Now you see the compute, the storage, the network are provided by the cloud service provider. In this case, we are using Azure. Now when we launch Databricks using Azure, we need to understand what type of compute capabilities it provides. Now, first of all, you have to understand the distributed processing because the requirement for compute comes from there. I hope you already know how the distributed processing works. If not, I would recommend you to go through the Spark course that I had created. The purpose of distributed processing is to process distributed data, which means that the data would also be distributed. So this is how it works. I'll be taking example of Spark because in most of the cases, we'll be using Spark for distributed processing. Obviously, we'll be using ingestion layers also, which would use distributed processing, but we'll not be able to see that. But as far as Spark is concerned, we need to know how Spark uses distributed processing to perform the task that it is asked to do. In Spark, the major component is the driver node or the driver JVM. And then we have executor JVMs. Now, all these executor JVMs would be created inside of one or more virtual machines in case of Azure. A single node can contain one executor process or one executor node or multiple executor node. Let's say For our example, we have 3 virtual machines, and each virtual machine is having 3 executed JVMs, or 3 executed processes. Then you have storage also, but the storage is distributed, meaning that the data would be distributed across multiple servers. And we do not have to take care of these things because Azure provides Azure Data Lake Storage or Blob Storage as distributed processing. And we do not have to worry about how the data is stored in a distributed fashion. That is handled by the Cloud Object Storage. Now, when you write a Spark code, we submit the Spark code to the driver. And then driver goes to the resource manager and then gets all the executors. After all the executors are launched, the Spark code is sent to all the executors so that they are executed parallelly. And each executor would handle only a subset of the entire data. That is how the distributed processing is. Now, why am I talking about distributed processing here? Because you see, the driver and the executor nodes need compute capability or need compute resources to run the Spark processing. And that's where the compute requirement for Databricks also comes into picture. As the drivers and executors need compute, there are multiple compute options provided by Databricks. First is the serverless compute, which is pay-as-you-go model. Now, this is the pricing model, but when I say serverless, it means that we do not have to provision the servers. It would be handled or managed by Databricks. So all the compute resources, the virtual servers, their scalability would be handled by Databricks itself. The scaling requirement would be completely automated and managed by Databricks. What I mean by that, let's say we need more processing power because of the Spark code or the Spark execution. Databricks will add more compute power, and if there is no requirement of more compute power, Databricks will scale down the compute. It also gives us lesser idle time, so the pricing would be lesser. If you use serverless compute for our development requirements, we can expect that the pricing would be less. Now, there are some very specific use cases where we use serverless compute. Because it is serverless, whenever we use for our development environment or testing environment, the compute resources would be assigned to the processing or assigned to the code. And once the processing is done, those would be terminated automatically, saving us cost. But it might not be useful for all production use cases. There can be scenarios wherein, let's say, we're running some Spark jobs only at a certain time of the day. Let's say out of 24 hours, we have a Spark job which runs only for 4 or 5 hours. So in that case, serverless would make sense because remaining 19 or 18 hours, we do not need the compute resources. So why to pay unnecessarily? So that's when serverless would make sense. Another compute capability provided by Databricks is the classic compute, which is launching of virtual servers or virtual machines inside of Azure Virtual Network. If you are using your Databricks platform for most of the time during the day or in a single day, then it makes sense to use classic compute because that would be cheaper. If you are using stream processing, then also classic compute would make sense because that might be cheaper. So this is the second compute resource that is provided by Databricks on Azure. One very important note is that the classic compute is not managed by Databricks, meaning the scaling requirements will not be handled by Databricks. If we need more processing power, if we need more memory, then we'll have to add virtual machines by ourselves. Of course, there are ways to scale automatically also, but we'll have to make sure to define the threshold when the scale out and scale in would happen. The final compute is the SQL warehouse compute. It is mainly used for warehouse queries or SQL queries, and it is typically used in the consumption layer or the final layer of the data lifecycle. I have talked about the resource hierarchy, and you have seen that how all the resources are stacked together in Databricks. Also, you have seen the Azure components, which are nothing but the compute resources, the storage resources, network resources, etc. So now I think you should talk about the mapping between the Databricks resources and Azure resources, or Azure components for that matter. Now you'll find a twist here. So let's wait for the twist. First, let's pull up the Databricks resources diagram. This is the one. At the top, we have the account, then you have the identities and Unity catalog. And then inside of account, we can create one or more workspaces. And each workspace would be associated with its own compute and network, its own folders, repos, notebooks, jobs, data lake tables, etc. The network can be same, but the compute would be different for individual workspaces. Now let's pull the Azure components. In Azure, at the top of the hierarchy, you know that we have the tenant and the tenant ID. We also call it as the Azure Global Account. The Azure Global Account is the one when you go to your Azure Entra ID console and click on users, there is one user which contains the email ID that you have registered Azure with. And there you'll find a global principal ID with the domain name on Microsoft.com. So that is the Azure Global ID or the Azure Global Account. So the Databricks account is mapped to that Azure Global Account. So whenever we go to the Databricks account, when you try to log into the Databricks account, we have to use that Azure Global Account. Then we have these user service principals groups, which are nothing but the identities. And I had told you that these things remain within Databricks in a thick wall. But the problem is that the account or the Databricks account that we log in is using the Azure Global Principal ID, which is hosted on Microsoft AD or Microsoft Entra. So that's why the identities in Databricks cannot live in isolation. So we'll have to use the Azure identities to create the identities in Databricks also. So all these user service principals groups, etc., will be mapped to the Azure identities. Now Unity Catalog is different. We'll be creating Unity Catalog in Databricks, and that will use the blob storage to store metadata and all other information. Then in Azure, we have physical resources like the virtual network, the virtual machines or servers, and Azure blob storage. The network would be associated with the virtual network or mapped to the virtual network, and the compute would be mapped to the Azure compute components. Likewise, folders, repos, notebooks, etc. will be stored in Azure blob storage. So this is how the mapping is done between Databricks and Azure. So see, a lot of things are tied together. So a lot of components of Databricks are tied with Azure components. So let us go ahead and see this in practice.